Welcome to Hexapodcast, brief discussions about insects and entomologists with your hosts, John Steyerman and Lee Dyer.
Hey, John Steyerman. It's good to see you again, man.
Hey, Lee. What's up?
Yeah, what's up in the world of insects? Today we have a special guest, Dr. Matt Forister from the University of Nevada, Reno. And Matt's going to help us talk about this vast topic of insect diversity. He says it's too much to discuss in one podcast, but we'll give it a shot. Welcome, Matt.
Hi, nice to be here.
Well, it's great to have you, man. So John and I are going to ask you some questions, and we're going to say stuff that we think, we know about insects, and we'll just all kind of pitch in. But basically, I just had three questions that I thought we could talk about, unless you wanted to start with a story. Last week, John told us a story about how there is a student who actually wants to study fly systematics in his lab at Wright State University.
Like a fly is a very lazy name for an insect.
I don't have a dream that's so beautiful, so we should just get to the questions.
Yeah, let's jump right in. But first, just give us a definition of a species. Because as you know, I use interactions as the unit of interest when studying diversity. But here we will go with the standard unit, and that is species. So we're going to talk about species diversity. But to do that, some people don't even think there is such a thing as a species. So to do that, let's start with the species concept.
Yeah, so if I've got to define it, I guess I'd go with some sort of evolutionary species concept. You know, a population can go its own way.
You can go your own way. Go your own way.
In terms of response and adaptation and all those things.
Okay, great. So we're going with the Fleetwood Mac species concept for this entire episode of Hexapodcast. One other quick thing, could you just tell us a little bit about your exciting new journal? I want to hear more about that.
Sure, yeah. We have recently founded the Journal of Lost Species. So there's a gazillion journals in the world, right? And it's almost like, I think, a stereotypical middle-aged academic thing to do to make a neurojournal, but that wasn't the goal. I had kind of a revelation. You have a few good ideas in life, and honestly, I feel like this is one of them, so I'm kind of proud of it, and that's to have a journal where people can report on the loss of species, which can be extinction or declines to the point where you can't find something. And so reporting extinction and loss and then promoting rediscovery. People like to go out and look for things that they haven't seen in a long time. And it's kind of a dream, and that it's highly impractical, and there's all kinds of organisms for which we can't do it. But it has, I think, struck a nerve with people, and we've got editors from all over the world, and we are juggling 13 manuscripts that are in review right now that I'm pretty excited about. And it's also, I think it's kind of fun science. Like, it's very publicly accessible. It's not very technical. It's really, when was the last time we found something, and do you want to go look?
So let's switch to today's podcast about diversity, which I admit is a vast topic. And let's start with extant species. Preferably talk about extant species of insects, but Matt likes to talk about everything, which is fine. I usually give the exaggerated range of 4 million to 80 million based on some older papers. What do you guys think?
Well, yeah, I thought that it kind of been narrowed down to 3 to 5 million, right?
No.
Nope, man.
I thought the recent papers that use various methods, numbers of described species over time and stuff like that. It's kind of brought the estimates of the total number down to, 5 million kind of is like the high estimate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait,
Leave it quiet. I'm the guest here, right?
Okay,
Shouldn't
go
I
ahead.
tell you what I'm doing?
Let's hear what Matt thinks about this.
Okay. So I just did this in my class, so I'm pretty primed. If you Google it or ask some biologists, not John Steyerman, the number you'll get is 8.7 million, which is from that Mora et al. Paper from a number of years ago, which I think was kind of clever. Like I when I covered this paper in my class, I both love it, and then the question is, why might it be wrong? So 8.7 million, I think that has to be doubled at least. And I think fungi alone would double that.
You know what I'm saying?
If
We're not counting bacteria here, right?
love bacteria and archaea, but no, we're not counting those. But if you just do fungi, it would double it. It has to be 16 to 20 million. And then if you go for other groups that we are really woefully undereducated about the higher levels of diversity, right? Because that Moore et al. Is based on having the right numbers for higher bits of the Linnaean taxonomy. And if we've like missed some orders and families, it jumps way up. So
Yeah.
I say 30 to 50 for my class million.
Dr. Forister is talking about estimates for the total number of species of multicellular organisms, not just insects.
I'm saying that 3 to 5 million, not because I believe that, but because I thought that that was what people were honing in on in terms of doing, various analyses. But no, I think that that's a low number. And just as a case in point, so the group that I work on, which are relatively large, so we should know them well relative to tiny things. Neotropical tachinids, we're maybe at 10%. Like that 10% would be a high estimate of what of the species that are out there that have been described, and that's a relatively large insects. So yeah, I think it's probably 10 million ish.
And John, I think you were right in saying there are people that have wanted to push the Moore et al. Estimate down.
Isn't the right thing to do?
My estimate for 3 to 5 million was for insects.
Then that actually matches the Mora paper, I think.
Okay, so we all agree it's 8 million species of insects. And I'm wondering what you guys think about what the best approach is for figuring out how many species there are.
And then a bug is miscellaneous. Anything that I don't know what that is, that's a bug. You know?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, there have been lots of different ways of getting at it. I think some more of the more recent ways are these studies where they, like the big Canadian, the Hebert et al. Canadian study where they set out malaise traps and they sequenced everything, and they're like, okay, how many sequences are there? How many, what do they call those bins, right? Sequence CO1 bins are there? And then they say, okay, well, if Canada's X% of the world's total fauna, then you extrapolate that. The one group that had the most unknown, relatively the most unknown species from their malaise traps, which is only flying insects, were gall midges. Right? They estimated there may be gall midges and there are beetles. Which was pretty cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. So these are all variants of Terry Irwin's 1982 study where you just extrapolate. So in this case, it was just beetles and one species of tree, Lueus mannii. But it seems like that's what everyone still does. They have some method like a focal tax at one site, and then they extrapolate.
I think the right answer has to be we just support people who are figuring it out for different lineages. Right? Because we just have this long history of extrapolation tricks, and they just keep getting more and more sophisticated, but they're still just tricks, and they're ignoring the fact that we might be missing major lineages. I mean, think about the bizarre eukaryotes that live around the grains of individual sand at the bottom of the ocean. I mean, there's entire phyla that we don't understand.
But just to be devil's advocate, like what if you just you did samples, you collected eDNA, so you're collecting DNA from all these things like in aquatic environments or whatever. What if you just sequenced everything? Maybe that is the actual, if you want to know how many things there are and you come up with some rough, cutoff, or that's different from the other thing.
Here's the devil's proposition on diversity, right? What if you could know the exact number, but you don't get to know the identities of any more species moving forward? Would you take the proposition or not?
No, that's not interesting at all to me.
There you go. Okay, I think that's good.
Wait, I shouldn't say at all. It's a tiny bit interesting, but I think it's less interesting than knowing something about one species.
Yep, because we know it's all burning, right? So we might as well learn about a few more, I think.
And that's the thing about this unknown diversity is it's not the number per se, whether it's 5 million or 8 million or 80 million. It's the stories. It's the actual species itself, and that's why funding the taxonomy is more important than funding the special extrapolation method. And sometimes those extrapolation methods don't necessarily, they're working in areas that are pretty well studied anyway, and so it doesn't necessarily reveal any new species. Okay, so we have to keep moving here because I have a short attention span, and maybe so do the 2 or 3 listeners that might be listening to the podcast.
Dyer tries to move on to the next topic, but First, he wants clarification on how many species of insects, not fungi, not nematodes, how many insect species are on the Earth. What do you think, Dr. Forister? Do you agree with John Steierman's estimate?
Whatever John says, I'll do it by 10 just to be.
Okay. Okay. So
Let's just say 5. Let's say 5 million.
Okay, there's 5 million species of insects. Why are there so many species of insects?
Okay, so how do we get new species? Let's imagine the neutral process. So some island rises. Yeah, you both take a drink.
You guys are getting paid?
Some island rises out of the sea, and something new colonizes. Right, it's going to be a primary producer as a first shot, and then a million years go by, and that primary producer disperses to the other side of the island, and by chance we might get two species, by which we mean some differences have accumulated such that those two things are going to go on their own evolutionary paths. It doesn't mean they're not going to necessarily ever interbreed, but they're mostly on their path. So we got two species. So time goes on, and it might be that one of those goes extinct before another one arises. But if we get lucky, we might have a couple arising at the same time, and then we can get a snowballing process where we're going to start to get more species. So that's the neutral model in my brain of how we get species. And then some lineages get on the fast track. Like some lineages have a ticket that gets them over that initial threshold sooner, and then it's an exponential process. Once you start getting more species, you get a lot more species. So the question is, why did insects get one of the tickets? And did they get a ticket because they form the species faster, or because they go extinct at a lower rate? And then I'm going to pass it to you, John. You answer that. Do they speciate faster, or do they go extinct at a slower rate?
You can go your own way. Go your own way.
So I think that the reason insects are so diverse is that they're old. They've been around for a long time, right? There's been a lot of time for those processes to happen. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
Two is they're small, right? They're easily isolated, right? You don't need maybe a mountain range to necessarily isolate a population of insects. I mean, some of them don't have wings or hexapods, right?
So when I do this in class, and before we get to insects, we talk about nematodes, which I think are the wonderful foil for insects. Because as far as we know, we only have named like in the tens of thousands of nematodes, but they are the majority of multicellular life. So the nematodologists, that's probably not what they're called, estimate that if an alien picked up millions of individual animals, 4 out of 5 would be nematodes in abundance. So they win in abundance. They're small, they're old, they're specialized, right? Because you get ones that are living in your nose hairs and others that are living on your shoe. So why not them, and why insects in terms of diversity?
Well, okay, there's one thing is I think they are probably far more diverse than we understand. So they would correspond to those three things. But also there is something about the adaptability of insects, the body plans, maybe arthropods in general, maybe not just insects.
Yeah, I think you gotta include their nervous system and also the tracheal system of insects, but then also with respect to the question that Matt was asking, the short generation times and the sort of the classic are selected. That feeds into them being able to quickly adapt, right? And then sexual selection is another huge one.
Well, wait, what about the whole complex life cycle thing? Because the most diverse groups of insects have this separation between the adult and larval niches, and that definitely has something to do with the enormous diversity of insects.
It's almost like insects hit a sweet spot, right? Whereas nematodes might be so darn good at what they do that they actually maintain large population sizes and connectivity even though they're specialized. Where insects might have certain shortcomings that are always fracturing populations and leaving them isolated and open to selection, not because they're so darn amazing. I mean, of course they're amazing, but because they actually sort of fail in dispersal or fail in connectivity, which facilitates evolution.
So they're diverse because they suck.
Yeah, no, it's a sweet spot. They're good at some things, they're not good at everything. Maybe nematodes are good at everything, and then I'll stop talking about nematodes.
No, nematodes.
Those are great. Yeah, the whole metabolist thing, though, John, you're right. And if you look at the top four, the Coleoptera, Lepidoptera, Diptera, Hymenoptera, and then the next one down is Hemiptera, and they're pretty far down. There's maybe 100,000 described species of Hemiptera, and they're the only non-holometabolous insects that have diversified impressively, and they are specialized oftentimes on plants.
Well, and I was going to say, we didn't say plants. I mean, there is a plant bias in those mega groups too.
Yeah, there is. There's a parasitic bias, though, maybe, because some of those groups have a ton of parasites. Like the parasitic Hymenoptera is incredibly diverse, right? It's another group that I bet you we've got about 10% described.
I include that under specialization. But here's another idea. It may not be just one story, right? The Hemiptera are incredibly diverse, but they don't have that whole metabolist development. But they've got some other things, right? So there might be a couple different stories within the whole giant insect diversity story.
Okay, so I can play the neutral card even harder if you want. Is if you look at the distribution of diversity at different levels in the hierarchy of life, whether or not it's among phyla or orders or families, all the way down to genera, you always get a few that are super diverse and most are not. The repeatability of that pattern suggests to me that diversity just happens, and it's always the case that a few lineages get the lucky card, and they just by chance cross a threshold, and then they exponentially increase. So we tell stories about leps and coleops and dips, but it might be that they just got the lucky card, and you rerun it, it might be Neuroptera and something else that are crazy diverse. I don't know. We don't have a replicable planet to find out.
Like, there's a reason why Neuroptera are not as diverse as beetles, and it's probably in part due to the beetles. We could argue about why beetles are more diverse, but part of it is that Neuroptera, they're all predators. They don't do anything else but eat, their other organisms. But beetles do everything. Yep. Beetles make use of every possible food resource you can imagine, and there's something that allowed them to do that.
Yep. And I'm kind of like being devil's advocate, of course, but I do think it's useful to remember that. And I do maintain that wherever you look, you will find that non-normal distribution of diversity, which I think still deserves to be explained.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. Okay, I'm going to hit the last topic.
What? I thought we were just getting started.
So then the last thing is really kind of a question for Matt, but I want to hear John's thoughts on it too. And that topic is recent declines in insect diversity due to global change parameters, which is something that's really hard to document for insects.
Documenting declines is hard enough. In any spot, can you find fewer of something than you used to? And the thing that you wrote recently, Lee, I've continued to think about it. Like in the tropics, in diverse places, how hard it is to even figure out that something is declining, let alone extinct. And then extinction is super hard because extinction means the last individual has died, and it takes decades to agree upon that. And there's also this quirkiness that we've kind of ceded that definition to the IUCN. Like there's this international body that we've decided they get to decide when things are extinct, and they've done a great job, and they're really hard workers, but there's a real backlog of things to be considered. So I think we simply don't know how many things are going extinct because declines are hard enough.
Hard times come again no more.
We talked that most insect diversity is unknown, right? And there's a few groups that are well studied, that people are interested in, maybe dragonflies, maybe butterflies, where we might be able, because there's enough people out there looking for them, that we might be able to document these kinds of declines. But for most insects, we'll never know. For example, I've been working on a revision of some species or of a genus of tachinid flies, and I have these samples from South America, like from El Salvador, that this was collected, in 1940 or something like that from El Salvador. And I'm thinking this thing probably doesn't exist anymore. So even things that we're describing as new, they may be extinct in the wild, and we'll probably never know.
Yep. And then the harder question is, given all that uncertainty, how do we compare modern extinctions to the fossil record? And that's like It's just super hard.
So it seems like the answer to the question for me is that we don't necessarily try to document decline, is that we get out there, collect as much as we can, and get as much natural history observation recorded as possible, and just really focus on that.
And it's also okay to believe in conservation. Insects have amazing power to persist in tiny spots, and so if we can carry some of them with us for the next few decades, maybe there's hope. Maybe human civilization will collapse and they can have it all back.
What a time to be alive, huh? Right at the end here. Isn't it amazing? It's the end of civilization, and I'm still just so focused on getting in my steps.
So someone said to me who was on my committee a million years ago, PhD wise, like, okay, so you have to make a decision for resources, and you can either learn something new or you can fly to some remote Pacific island and you stop the extinction of some dung beetle that lives on the top of a volcano. Which do you do? And I say, like, let's save the dung beetle volcano. Like, why not? So yes, charismatic, but also like, let's talk about saving things just because we can.
Okay, we've exceeded our time limit, so let's give some final quick take-home messages about insect diversity.
What drew me to entomology and studying insects was that incredible diversity and all the unknown diversity out there. So, and even though it's complex and there's lots of unknowns, I find it very attractive intellectually to think about and to learn about. So diversity is one of the reasons why insects are special and why we're interested in them.
I think diversity is the greatest puzzle the planet's got, and we shouldn't give up trying to understand it while we still can.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and it doesn't have to be biotic diversity. I think diversity as a concept is one of the most fascinating scientific concepts that we could investigate. And it's intellectually challenging, interesting, and worthwhile. And I can talk to just about anybody on a bus, in a different language, on an airplane about diversity and get them interested in it. Not because I'm good at talking about it, but more because it's interesting.
I also love the things that humans do. A lot of things I don't love about humans these days, but I love the things that humans do that are futile and just for their own sake, like art, right? Like, we don't actually need to know about those last echinids from El Salvador, but we want to, and so why shouldn't we? Like, it's no different than a painting in that way to me.
Why everything turned around.
Okay, thanks for having me. It's been pretty fun.
It's fun for me. Starman thinks it's boring, though.
No, I think now that we have Matt here, it got interesting.
Thanks, guys.
All right, well, thanks, you guys.
Thanks again, all you entomophiles, for listening to Hexapodcast. We will see you next time for a deep dive into insect digestive physiology. Excellent stuff.
On the wheel right by your side. Hold on to the end of the line. Lay with you while the night is still. Proves you haven't lost your will. Soon the road will be clear. The days only go up from